Anyways, hi everybody. If you have a question or you want to speak directly with Sarah as we get rolling, if it's okay with Sarah, we'll just ask people to unmute themselves and speak. Like you don't have to type your question into chat because by the time I answer it for you, we'll be on to something else. I can't type that fast. So feel free to unmute yourself. And thank you all for being here. I'm so excited. We always have so many people that sign up, but not everybody can always come. And this will be on our YouTube station. Probably tomorrow. It live streams over there, but then there's something I have to do to make it work, and I have to rely on one other person to make sure I don't mess that up. So it'll be available on our YouTube channel, so you'll have the opportunity to watch it if you can't stay the whole time or something else. And if you have a question that you want to ask of Sarah that you forgot to ask or you didn't hear the answer to and you had to leave, either get it to me or get it to Sarah, and we'll answer those questions for you. And I will put my contact information in the chat for those of you who want to write that down as soon as I figure out how to open the chat. And then what else? Well, so my introduction to Sarah. I found Sarah online, like everybody else during COVID, and then I had the opportunity to meet her at the Atlanta Contemporary Jewelry Show and see her work up front and close and personal, and meet Sarah, which was such a delight because I think really, I'm just going by the vibing that happens when we're together, but I think she's so kind and approachable. And I would imagine those are things that translate beautifully into teaching. And I just thought, I don't know how she does the stuff that she does, but I need to learn how to do this because I don't know about you guys, but I have access to presses both at MAG and also at home, but I don't really know how to do everything. I know how to punch things out like cookie cutter, pancake dies. I know how to do texturing. I know how to do silhouettes poorly. I was just sharing that, I punch the thing all the time and don't know how to do it. And my favorite story is that a friend of mine was holding up a picture of Sarah's earrings, and we were trying to figure out how she made them. And we finally just decided to stop doing that and just to have Sarah come and teach for us. So Sarah does amazing things with a hydraulic press. One of my favorite things that she does with jewelry making is, she has these poofy things. So think of them as small hollow forms, and then beautiful gems are coming out of them. And it's like a waterfall of yumminess. And her earrings are that way. And everything my everyday favorite earrings are a pair that Sarah made. And I always get so many compliments on them. And sometimes I just like to say, thank you, which is not the same as saying someone else made them, but I can't do that. So I just say, oh, they're not mine. How think I made these? These are Sarah's. Look her work up on wherever, Instagram or on her thing. So anyway, Sarah does things with the press, though, that I think if they can be replicated in a studio through hand fabrication, it would take forever. And you would really have to be amazingly talented at making small objects symmetrical and beautiful. And I know that some things can be done, and there are people who know how to make hollow forms with a hammer and all that stuff. But I wanted Sarah to teach us how to make our metal multidimensional and how to use that press. That when I first was introduced to a press, I thought I was going to lose my eye using it. I was terrified because people said it could be dangerous. And now I know better than that. If you know what you're doing, it's not so dangerous. And so I want Sarah to share with us how she got hooked on the press and what her background is. And I know you teach, and I know you show your work because I've seen it in public, forums and shows. But I'm going to stop talking and let you share who you are with us. This is our first date for the most part. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Susan. And thank you to Mag to, invite me here, and really excited to be able to teach in Atlanta. I would say, starting from the beginning, I was studying education. And can you guys hear me okay? Is everybody okay?
Yes.
Awesome. And I was studying secondary education, and I always had an interest in art, but I couldn't really figure out the making a living portion of the equation. And it just so happened the place that I was studying education also had a metalsmithing program. And I was fortunate to sign up for a metalsmithing class somewhere in the early 90s. And also was fortunate that they had a hydraulic press in the studio space available to me. And I had to say it was one of those moments where I fell in love instantly with metalsmithing generally, with the fact that here was a field that had like there's just so much history, so much that I could learn, and really after decades of doing this, I still feel like I'm excited to come to my studio space every day. So I feel fortunate that I found what I wanted to do and loved doing very early on. So it's been over 30 years that I've been working with the press, and I've always taught sort of in tandem with my studio work. And I love teaching, and I love the energy that my students bring. I love learning from my students in particular. And I think it works for me as an artist because I really I'm constantly trying new ideas and new processes. And as a business person, sometimes that doesn't work for me because I'm constantly in research and development. But as a teacher, it's ideal because it gives me an excuse to use that part of my brain to try things. And then I love when my students bring questions like, well, what if we did this? Or what if we put A next to B? Would that work? And I really love those conversations and kind of figuring it out together. So again, I fell in love with the press a long time ago. I took a workshop in the early 90s with Lee Marshall, who was one of the pioneers of bringing the press to jewelers, because the press itself has been around for hundreds of years. That part wasn't extra special. It was kind of making it simple enough and kind of bringing it to like what we're all doing and working with our in our studios in smaller spaces. Um, and because I came from more of a sculpture background, I think I've always kind of thought more three-dimensionally in terms of my pieces. And so I think that you'll see that a lot in the way I teach and the way I think about different projects. So I really wanted to use some time to show you all some samples of more finished pieces, if you will. And I know that you've seen some photos online, but you know, seeing them up close and kind of me being able to turn them around for you can give you some better ideas of what we'll be doing in class. And I was going to tell you too that so part of the idea, so this is one, you know, I would say a finished piece, and it you can see it has the actual ability to hang on the wall, and it has all the individual pieces like a quilt would. But I'll say this, the project itself um, came from a place where I found with teaching and working with students over many years that there's a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves to leave a workshop or a class with a thing. And sometimes I found as an instructor that pressure ended up taking away the experience that a student could have because there's a lot of fear. And so a lot of people, I think, especially when you take a class as an adult, we all, like whatever we're doing in our daily lives, whatever we do to make a living, we're probably pretty good at it. And so to take a class or to try a new experience, that's something that you might not get right the first time, is kind of a hard place for some of us to be put in. So I find that by just having a project that gives you an excuse to try something, It doesn't have to be this huge pressure of the first time you do it, it's going to be a fantastic thing that it can be. Not to say that it can't be that experience. So the idea behind this class and this project is that it allows you to try individual techniques that are with the hydraulic press. It allows you to try different things with like working with the dyes, where I call them sometimes raviolis, where you puff them, or embossing, and not have you be so fearful that whatever you're working on is going to be a failure or a success. It really just allows you to try the process. And then on the other side of that, once you've tried something and you realize, you're like, ooh, like I really love what I can do with embossing and some of these pieces that I already have in my toolbox, then you can start to think about how you can put them together and incorporate them in something that could be a wall hanging or something that is more sculptural. So that's really the idea behind the sampler quilt idea. Um, Again, one of the main questions that I've gotten about this workshop is that you might be saying, well, you know what, I'm really interested in wearable pieces. I'm not really interested in sculptural pieces. That is awesome. Everything that I am talking about in terms of technique, we'll talk about in terms of a wearable piece versus something that is going to be more sculptural and hang on the wall. So there's really not any difference. It's just really what you end up kind of taking the technique and the process and then end up doing with it over there. So I don't want to dissuade anybody in terms of the class. If you're thinking, again, like you're really sure interested in is wearable pieces, that's great. A lot of discussions that we have in class are going to kind of bounce back and forth. And sometimes it's really just a difference of talking about the thickness of the metal that you use for one technique or another. And there's not many other differences. So, but again, that was just sort of the foundation of the class, the idea that you could make a sample, that if you're happy with it, it could be incorporated into a larger wall piece. Or if you're really just interested in wearable pieces, then we can have those conversations, and we will in the workshop as well. I brought some other pieces. So when we talk about something that's more wearable, this would be an example of something that, could easily be worn as a pendant or a brooch. And you can see some of the same kind of that ravioli puff that we'll be doing with the hydraulic press, the idea of building up layers. And really, the class also pairs beautifully with cold connections. And a cold connection is just a fancy term for essentially attaching two things together without the use of fire or a flame. And so we're really partnering the hydraulic press with all of these types of cold connections. And so again, you can see all these different little rivets. They almost look like nail heads. That is what is called a cold connection. And you can see them going through to the other side as well. So I just wanted to show you all. So here's another one. This one I've incorporated silk cord. And so again, under normal circumstances, we wouldn't be able to solder something like that because of that silk cord. So this is also licensed to start to incorporate other materials that might not necessarily be friendly to soldering. And so when we think about stones, when we think about buttons, we think about photographs, pieces of plastic, found objects that you might have. Again, this is a set of projects and a technique that is really friendly to mixing those types of materials. So this one, you can see is actually a brooch. I've got the pin back there. This would definitely have been soldered on first, but then the actual connecting those layers, the sandwich parts of it, to become wearable, that has all been done with a cold connection. And you'll see some of these. I kind of early on, when I was initially setting up a studio space, my first studio space was in my mom's basement. And she was not so happy with the idea that I would have a torch. So that was really where I started to develop the use of cold connections really early on. Because again, um, like how could I make a line of jewelry, but again, not have to have a torch? And so I started making all of these pendants that housed other items inside of them. Again, you see that familiar, that ravioli shape that is done in the hydraulic press. And then also, again, those cold connections are actually holding all of this together. So again, just to show you some examples that all of these, even though the final project I'm referring to as the sampler quilt, not to say that you can't make these into, something that's going to be wearable in the end. That is totally, totally doable. Um, the thing too that I love about cold connections and the hydraulic press is that it really allows you to build big. So if you guys like the idea of really making statement pieces that are larger and that some of your torches might have trouble actually soldering all of those pieces together, you can start to think about your cold or your mechanical connections as ways to kind of build bigger. Um, Again, just to kind of add something to your repertoire in terms of a maker. And then also, of course, you can see I am still soldering. I've got my traditional bezel there, and then of course the bundle of beads on the side. But again, my cold connections allow me to attach those two without worrying about hurting anything. And then we'll also talk about cold connections in that we are borrowing ideas and techniques from other kind of industries or different areas. So this one is actually that piece, that crystal, you guys can see that in there, that's actually stitched in there. So I'm borrowing from the sewing world again in terms of quilts and stitching. So we'll talk about how we'll use things like staples, stitching, and rivets, tube rivets. We'll also talk about what's known as a brad. So this piece would be kind of the beginning of a wall hanging piece, and we'll talk a lot about design and function, and if we do want something that's going to hang on the wall, how we can incorporate that. We're also going to talk about working with some pre-made cold connection pieces. So pieces that you could actually walk into a craft store and you can buy those little tiny brads, and whether they work with the rest of your piece, or we'll also talk about the idea that you fabricate all of those pieces. So there's a range, and I don't really believe in the idea that there's a rule that like you can't use something because it's not an appropriate material. I really think that you can make those decisions depending on who your audience is and who the work is going to be for. But this is just another example again of the types of cold connections, and you'll see all of these sort of soft ripples and this sort of undulating form, that is all done in the hydraulic press. The same thing with this, again, the familiar ravioli shape, but also those little lines through there, that's being done with the hydraulic press as well. So those are definitely techniques that we are going to touch on. This one you can see is still in process, but we'll also talk about how things like beads can be incorporated into your work. And we'll also talk about making our own connections, which could be, again, for a hangable piece, but this easily could be a chain piece or something that maybe scaled down a little bit more, a little bit of curving, could be something that could be totally wearable as well. So again, I don't want you to think that I'm locked in to kind of one technique or one project, I really like to work with each of you to figure out what it is that your goal is for the class. Got a couple other examples. This is another piece where it does certainly have soldered elements, but again, it's got that sort of puff, that ravioli shape that is done with a hydraulic press. And again, you can almost see better on the back of the piece, all those little kind of nail head areas, that's what's known as a rivet. And that's something that we'll be talking a lot about in class. And again, thinking about whether you want to make your own or do you want to work with some that are pre-made. It's totally fine. Sometimes it just depends on the material that you want to work in. And again, what your final project is. The other thing that we'll talk a lot about is, again, this idea of housing or kind of holding on to an item on the inside, but again, not using any flame. So this is like a ceramic disc that's in there. And so if I were to solder this in a more traditional way, the ceramic would not survive that process. And so cold connections, just like when you see I don't know if you guys can see that little, there's freshwater pearls in there. The pearls would definitely not survive being heated. Same thing with something like this, where it's got that labradorite stone in there. So we'll actually talk about this technique and kind of choosing an object or an item that works really well with the metal. And again, thinking about whether you do want it to be something that is more a sculptural piece that's going to hang on the wall, like you see this there with that little seashell, or again, if you want to isolate that and have something that is going to be wearable. There is just, I find, I mean, I mean it when I say I've worked with the hydraulic press for 30 years and I'm still in love with it. And I still find more things that it does for me. And there are many companies that are just devoted to its use. So just to show you a little bit, you guys are probably familiar with what's known as a pancake die. But if you're not, this is really going to be a way that we can cut out quickly some kind of pre-made pieces. But then we're going to take this an extra step and really think about how can you kind of customize that shape to your work, or thinking about how you can make multiples relatively quickly for something like a collar piece or a bracelet. So we'll talk about those. We're also going to talk about, there's a new kind of stamping system that Potter carries, and this is called an FSS system. It's a fast stamping system. So we'll talk about how that works and how that can really speed up some parts of your work. We're also going to talk about the difference between working with something that's commercially made and designing and sawing out your own shape. I don't have to tell you guys that you might have shapes and ideas that you're not finding commercially available. And so we'll actually work in class and cut out and design and really think about the shapes that we choose. And I have some exercises that help guide your design choices. And so that you really end up with this is called a die. And so you end up having a die that, I mean, you'll use these for years and years, and you will get so much variety out of them. Not to say that, like, again, you just have, it's not a one-time use thing. It is, I have a box about the size of a shoebox that I go back to over and over, and I'm always constantly making new ones as well. So we'll really talk about. And then there is, of course, there's times when the steel die that is commercially made, there are some things that it does really well. And so there'll be times that we'll want to work with that. And so we'll really kind of bounce back and forth and think about why one is important for us, and why when we want to make a custom shape, we'll be able to do that. So those are some of the kind of more the meaty technical parts of it. Um, does anybody have any questions so far in terms of what you've seen in the samples, or if you want to see anything closer up to the camera? Can I help you with that? Or Susan, anything do you think
Well,
you want me to add?
I'll talk about this more later, but in our studio, we have an electric press
Yes.
and we have a manual press, and then we have a deep draw setup, and we
Yep.
have I actually have only used that a few times, and I usually get things stuck inside of other things, and yeah,
Okay.
I have to mute. Okay, can you hear me still?
I can hear you great.
So, so if we only have two presses, is that enough to do what you
That
want to do?
is totally enough. And actually, that is an ideal combination of having one manual and one with the hydraulic lift. And I'll give you guys a little tour of my studio in a minute, and you'll see the press that I work with every day. But I actually started off with a manual press, and it worked great for me for probably 20 years. And eventually I decided to kind of move on to another level. But I really like, as a teacher, having both the manual and the hydraulic lift, because there's some things that the manual does better for us. Sometimes slowing down the process is nice. And then sometimes we want speed and we want to just move on to the next thing. And so the hydraulic lift does that
Yeah.
beautifully. Yes. So yeah, so two is great. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions about the press itself? Do you guys want to see
I have
some
a
of where I
quick,
work?
I
Sure.
have a question because I love that ripple effect. Do we need any special equipment or tools or anything to do that?
No, so I'll have we use actually acrylic to make that, and we'll talk about how we'll actually saw the acrylic,
Okay.
and it's what's known as a split die. And again, it's one of those things that is really pretty simple, but you get so much versatility out of it. And that's something that I'm really drawn to.
Mhm.
Like if I'm going to use my labor to make something, I really, and I mean, I should say, make something in terms of a tool. I really want it to be able to do multiple things for me. So yeah, it's a split die, and totally, you'll be surprised. Nothing extra special that you won't already have on hand, or I won't have for you to work with.
Sarah, I have a
Yeah.
question, Mindy.
Sure.
I do own several of your pieces, of your earrings and your necklaces. Were those all also made with the hydraulic press? And so I was trying to think, like, maybe you can show us some of the smaller pieces.
Yes. So yes. So now I'll say, like, some of my work now in terms of production, some of them a very small selection of what I make. Some of them I have cast, but for the most part, I'm gonna say like 95% of what I make is all fabricated, except for like the tiny little chains that I'm leaving to somebody else. But other than that, everything is fabricated with the press. So yes, the kind of bowl shaped
So,
earrings.
so my thought out, what I'm thinking about is you're showing us some of these big pieces, but you can also make quite small, like earrings or necklaces as well, multiples, etc. So this is
Absolutely.
it's transferable. All this information is transferable
Yes.
to small and large.
Totally. And I think really, like, I mean, this is a fairly, you could see that, I mean, if I wouldn't maybe make a double layer in terms of an earring, but this is totally a great earring size. So some of what I chose to show you all today was just something that would translate a little bit better for the camera. But yes, you can make, and I make tiny little, earrings, maybe a quarter that size with the hydraulic press as well. So yes, a huge amount of variety.
It's such a versatile piece of equipment.
It totally is. Yeah. Yeah. And I think at some point, somewhere along the way, I feel like sometimes the hydraulic press gets a bad name because people feel like, well, I don't want to make the same thing over and over again. Well, the reality is that, and you guys can look at my work, and I mean, maybe I should probably make more of the same thing, which I tend not to. You have the ability, if you want, like, I mean, I could press out that same form multiple times, and I have the ability to more systematically, if you will, like always get this same result if I wish. Or I kind of think of it as it allows me to kind of leapfrog into spending the time on other parts of the piece that I really want to. So maybe I'm really interested in, again, like the connections and the mechanisms and thinking about chain. This allows me to kind of make one portion of the piece maybe a little bit faster, but then have time to more thoughtfully think about other portions of it, or build in different layers of sophistication to the piece at hand. So, but yes, Mindy, totally. You can work tiny, you can work big, and you can kind of mix and match. Like you see, I mean, again, like I love ovals. You'll kind of see that as a motif that gets, I'm drawn to that shape. And so you'll see like this one is actually a little bit, like that one is actually a little bit bigger. But again, you can see how like I could actually have used that same die, if you will, and completely come up with a radically different project or piece in the end. So again, a huge amount of variation is possible. Yes. Yeah.
So do you also teach what some people would call fold forming also in the press, or do you leave that to someone else?
Yes, actually that was the one thing I did not grab those samples, but I want to say like probably years ago, it's not an important one, but I took a workshop with Charles Lilton Brain, and he's sort of I think, brought fold forming to so much of our community. And I realized that fold forming and the hydraulic press just work really beautifully. So I do have one example. I realized the back of this piece, it's quite subtle,
Oh, I love
but
it.
this is actually just what's known as a line fold. And so we'll talk a lot about, wondered if I had any other pieces out here. We will definitely talk about fold forming. And the other thing is I really like building up layers of either sophistication, you might in some ways, or just layers of technique. So what I mean is that I might start by just embossing a piece of metal, but then we'll take that back to the press, and then we'll do a ravioli shape, and then we'll go to our bench and we'll saw that and saw out a window. And so I really want you all to kind of think about how you can build up that all these different layers of technique. And I find that's really the best way for each of you to find your voice as a maker, to really think like, what is it what techniques really resonate to the type of work that you want to make. And it's usually not just one thing. It's usually like it's like the combo of four things. So it's like fold forming and bezel setting and the putting it in the hydraulic press. So we really work with ways of again doing a deep dive on how we can combine things. So fold forming is one of the things that we will spend some time on for sure in the workshop. Yeah, thank you for reminding me that, Susan.
And then are you open, like I'm thinking of, if you can visualize something, you would know the sequence, like, oh, I want to do a thing, but then it's this, but then it's this. And, I wouldn't know like how to put a texture in something and not ruin the texture when you poof something out, right? But I might want that effect.
Yes.
And that kind of work, I work experientially. So like I might be doing something, but I don't know what I can do next. And then I might have one of those moments where I'm like, oh my God, Sarah, can I make this happen? You know, and I get all excited and you're like, yeah, but you should have done that first. And then I have to kind of deconstruct and go back and then
Well,
or add.
I was going to say, I think that's great in terms of working intuitively. And I think that's one of the strengths of the press because we can do some things more quickly. And when you think about like making a sample piece, I mean, I can try this and I can try, you guys see my little airplane? I can try attaching things with cold connections, but then you might realize you're like, oh, like I could take this and again make a bracelet where I have all these different charms hanging, so it's like it's a charm bracelet but I've taken it into a totally different direction. I mean, that to me, I love that when the light bulb goes on for each of you and you realize like, oh wait, you mean I can do this and this? Like, yes, you totally can. And the beauty of the press is that you can kind of retrace your steps and realize like, okay, well, I used a found object to create this texture and I used this much pressure in the press. We'll talk about record keeping in the workshop. I find that's exceedingly important because you will be making so many samples that, I mean, if you guys are like me, I barely remember what I had for breakfast this morning. So like if you go back and you'll look at your samples and you'll be like, what did I do? And we'll talk about how you can, with note keeping, journaling, really simple things by just taking notes on your pieces itself. All of these things are repeatable. So that is the beauty of the press as well. It's not something, I mean, not that soldering is magical, but sometimes I think it is. I mean, like sometimes it's really hard to like, repeat a result. With the hydraulic press, that is much more doable, I find. So that's a lot of what it is too. And again, because I really want everybody to try everything and not be afraid and not feel like, oh, what if I did do this in the wrong order? Not worry about that. Then you also have the muscle memory where like you actually put that in the press and you got that result and you understood the layering concept. Then later on, when you do have the light bulb moment, even if it doesn't happen in the workshop, you have those, again, that muscle memory of actually trying it. And you're like, oh yeah, I totally got this. I can do this on my own. Because I think that's part of my job as an instructor too, is so you guys start to develop some skills so that you can work more independently. At least that's my thought as an instructor. So kind of to give you guys some guidelines and how to be able to do that.
For people that might be taking this class from their own studios, they have access to a press or a community-based place where they can use the workshop to do it. We're at the mercy of the equipment that we have a lot of times. So when I first bought a press, someone said, what the hell are you going to do with that? And I'm like, I don't know. I have to figure it out. Right. And I feel like I can drive to the grocery store and back. And that's all I figured out so far after about 9 years. And for economy's sake, I had to purchase so much stuff when I bought my press. One of the things I decided I could live without was a gauge, right? And it's manual. So you talk about muscle memory. I know what it feels like when I'm going to punch through something, right? And I want that sometimes, and I want to take it to the edge sometimes, and then I want to make something look like a chicken just made its way out of an egg. Like I want it to blow up.
Yeah.
Can you teach us, like, when you say the muscle memory and recording pressure on a gauge, it's easy, but like, could you do 4.5 pumps takes me to the, is it like that?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So on my press, my last manual one, I burned out my original jack that came with it. And then when I replaced it, I didn't replace the gauge. And so essentially I came up with a system. So it was like 4 pumps would give me this result. Maybe 6 pumps was too much and I broke through it. And I apologize, you guys, if I don't want to get into the weeds in terms of not understanding what we're talking about in terms of pressure. But yes, I actually want you all to experience what it feels like and what it looks like when you use something like these dies and you break the metal. I think it can be both, again, educational in terms of what the press does, what its limitations are, but also from a design standpoint. So this piece here, if you guys can see this, maybe from the back better. Can you guys see those stitches? This was one where the die, I basically had pressed it, you could say, quote unquote, too far, or maybe I wanted to do that intentionally, but it broke along that edge. And so this was one of those instances where I used that and ended up stitching it and becoming another part of the piece. But we'll definitely talk about those nuances. There's also several different brands of presses out there. I work with the Bonnie Doon, but I have also worked with Potters, both some of their very new ones. So yeah, we'll definitely talk about Harbor Freight carries one, and sometimes this is just trial and error. I mean, you just got to try it and see. I do often recommend working with something like copper initially because, again, I want to remove that fear factor, and that, again, you don't want to grab your piece of sterling silver that, you know, whatever the market value is right now. You don't want to think to yourself, ooh, I don't want to break this, I don't want to ruin it. And so by working with copper and something that is less expensive, again, I'm trying to remove some of that fear in terms of just trying a process. Just try it and see what you get. And sometimes you're going to love it. Sometimes you're going to be like, ooh, but maybe I can do X, Y, and Z and just take it to another whole level. Yes. Any other questions? Any other questions in terms of like some of the projects that you could do, in terms of the technique? I mean, I'll tell you, like, this is my stack of samples. This is not even complete of different embossing possibilities. Embossing is just one of those things that I won't say limitless, but it's pretty darn close of the different possibilities. We'll talk about too, I think Susan touched on this, the idea of which order to do things. So we'll actually talk about roller printing and how roller printing is a really nice partner, just like fold forming. It's a really nice partner with the press. So we'll definitely talk about that as well. And again, that idea of like which order do I want to do things in, depending on what your desired outcome is for your piece. Yes, or pieces. Yeah.
How about friends online with us? Questions?
Ask
No.
away, you guys.
I want
No?
to take the class tomorrow. No.
Okay.
I have a
Okay.
because I love the printing, but when I've pressed a roller printed piece, I tend to lose the texture. Is there a good gauge to use of thickness where it won't, the texture won't get puffed out?
It might be, I might be going to a little bit heavier gauge. And it might also be thinking about when you do your initial roller printing, what it is that you're using to, like, so if it's like one of those texture plates, those usually have a nice amount of depth to them. But if you're using something like a found texture, that might be too subtle. And so we can kind of talk about like here, this is an example of, I don't know if you guys can see that on camera. This was roller printed initially, and then it was formed. And that is one of kind of the classic things that the hydraulic press does beautifully, is that, yes, I could take this and I could hammer it into a die, but I would end up losing almost all of my texture, or I would not have as smooth and even a surface. So it would just end up being something different. So trying to think if I have another example here. This is another one that's roller printed.
Hmm,
And
good.
this is, I'm working here with, which I can bring samples of as well. This is a laser cut paper, Rolling Mill Resource carries. I love their, and they'll do custom work for you as well. But this is, again, so it might be, so Donna, to answer your question, it might be a question of maybe a little thicker gauge and maybe looking at what it is that you're using to print to, yeah, but it's totally doable. Totally doable. Yes.
Good, thank you, because I love some of your pieces with that deep texture. I'm like, how does she do it?
It's
So,
really like, and I do have a tendency, which sometimes gets me into trouble with in terms of like earrings. I do really like heavier, thicker metal. But again, we always have to kind of have that discussion about what is this going to be in the end? And do you want a pair of earrings that is really going to weigh somebody down? Or if it's going to be something like a necklace where you could, I mean, within reason, you can have that pretty heavy if you want. So yeah, we definitely touch on things like that.
thank you.
Yes.
And then in terms of what kind of metals we can use in the press, I mean, I know like gold, silver, brass, copper. Are there other,
Mhm.
like, do you steel? Like, what other things that we might not have thought about can you press?
You totally can use, so people that do enameling, for instance, and they want to work with, and I'm not using the right term, it's not enameling iron. Oh, what is that called? There's another metal that enamelists use to enamel on steel, and it's basically it's soft enough to be formed in the press. I actually had a previous student who that was what they were interested in, and so I
Okay.
did some experiments
Cold
with
melt.
steel. You also can do things like take like old tin boxes
Mhm.
or aluminum cans, things
Oh,
like that. That all can be pressed. The challenge with a lot of those things is that the edge becomes very sharp.
right.
And so you have to be very thoughtful about how you're going to cover that edge so you don't cut yourself. Because
Mhm.
that's the one thing with, and titanium works beautifully, niobium, all of those different types of metals. But again, and that might be also where a dialogue with cold connecting works, because again, we can't solder or we can't easily solder a lot of those materials. Niobium and titanium, we definitely can't solder. Um, but in something like a decorative tin box, if we did solder it, it would actually remove all of the paint and so on. So yeah,
What about,
mostly what I use is brass, copper, sterling, and gold, but there are definitely other possibilities.
mhm. Someone
Yeah,
said that there's something called enameling iron that,
that's what it is. Yes, enameling iron, which is not actually iron. When I did my research, it's a type of steel.
Mhm.
Yes, so that is totally doable. And yeah, I got some really beautiful results. And the only downside, which again, this is getting too technical, is that that is really a good partner with my it's a good partner with my metal dyes as opposed to my acrylic dye. But that's something again, safe for the workshop in terms of the nitty gritty.
do you bring
Yeah.
your dyes with you when you come to teach? I mean, we have some, but I don't know if we have complete sets of everything. And then the,
I'll bring steel ones, and then I mean sometimes intent in, depending on what time is allowed, like sometimes I ship things ahead of time. But yeah, and that's something that I'll work with you, and depending on what mag already has a collection of,
all those
um,
pictures
I
on the Facebook.
try to supplement as much as I can. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, I hope, I mean, it just gives you a good foundation. I was just going to say as a quick note, before I forget, if you guys have other questions, you can always reach out via Instagram. I'm at Chapman Metals, and or you can email me, sarah@chapmanmetals.com. Particularly if you have other things in terms of what subject matter we're going to be touching on in class. That's definitely a good way to get in touch.
this class is also, I mean, I see some people on this list who might not be local to Atlanta. So simultaneously, we'll also have our virtual group too, who are at home
Yes.
wherever they may be, you know, in the world. We had someone from England this past weekend in one of our
Yes.
classes. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's the beauty of Zoom. Yeah, exactly. So you guys could definitely tune in from your own private studios. And I mean, Susan, you can speak more to this too. Than I know you actually reserve time so that I can spend asking or answering questions with
Yeah.
the students that are virtually attending.
Right. So one of the concerns that people have about taking virtual workshops, and it's understandable, especially if it's a hybrid model where it's a live in studio and online simultaneously, is people feel like they're not going to get the amount of attention that they need because they're not in the classroom. And what we've devised that I think is really nice, there's two things that get to happen if you're at home. Valerie might be able to speak to this too. That you get to work while Sarah's working. So you're working along with the person teaching. When you're in the classroom, we try to respect the noise level. And so we're not jumping about doing everything that the teacher's doing in the workshop. We're watching and we're learning, and then we have a dedicated work time. For people that are at home, they get to work along. And then during what I call the work time, Sarah has the ability to help some people in the room, but also do kind of like one-on-one with the online people where you would go, Sarah, up to the computer that we have and put on a pair of headphones, and you're talking to whoever wants to listen. And you can also see people. So it's both and it's all being recorded. And sometimes we use Zoom as our modality because it's easier, like we're talking to each other right now. But then we have these fancy cameras that are all over the studio, and our Zoom capacity, not Zoom as in Zoom platform, but Zoom as in you can see better. We have these really high tech cameras, and we have different angles set up all over the studio. So if Sarah's at the press, people can see her there. And if she's at the something else, people can see her there. If she's soldering, someone can see her there. And our ability to go in very closely, you can see the hairs on people's hands pretty easily. So we feel and we have a dedicated AV crew who's there for that purpose only. And then we have what we call artist assistants who are taking care of the actual Zoom platform. So Valerie counterweighs on this, and Valerie is the queen of having taken more classes online than anyone I can think of. Valerie, can you hear me? Yeah, are you there? Maybe she's not there. But Valerie, are you talking to us? Might be shy, or she's not unmuted. But
Maybe.
yeah.
Well, do you guys want to take a quick spin around my studio? Because I think we just have a few more minutes. Is there anything else that Susan you wanted me to touch on?
Oh, I didn't mean to do so much talking. Anyone else in the audience that want to ask questions or get personal needs met? No. Yeah, I want to see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna switch my camera around, and really, I'm just gonna old-fashioned walk you guys around.
Ooh, look at this fancy dress.
So yeah, right in the middle of the room, I'll stand back here. That's my Bonnie Doon.
Yay.
And I've got about 450 square feet. I've been in this space for about 2 years. And I've been in the building for about 12 years. That's my kind of tumbling. I guess I have 3 different tumblers. I love them all. My buffing machine. I've just been switching things around. So I have one bench on this side of the room, and then I have a second one that I just moved in. So I'm going to be able to have some different work areas. So maybe sometimes I want to work on carving wax, and I don't have to clear off my entire work area. I really love my press in the center of the room because, no surprise, I'm pretty much working with it on a daily basis. And so I also find there are some techniques that just work really well in terms of kind of getting around the actual machine. And I've got things like nice big cutters and again, more work areas so that I can, spread things out. So again, you guys can see all of the samples spread out. I'll show you guys these. These are some pieces I just finished. some wall pieces, and they really, again, capitalize on the idea of a cold connection. So you can see the corners are brads that I made and little rivets. So again, kind of the same idea, but kind of taking it to just another place. And then over here, during something like a open studio, which the building has several times a month, that is where I would have my jewelry out on display. But yeah, normal circumstances, I just find it's just really nice to have some flexibility and kind of be able to switch things around as needed. So that's just a little bit of a quick tour of where I get to work every day. The building is also, it's one of the oldest buildings in Minneapolis. It was built in the 1800s, so I don't even know how tall the ceilings are and the exposed brick and everything. So yeah, it's a joy to come to work every day, for sure. Yes.
Is it still winter there?
And there's no snow on the ground. It's getting warmer. I mean, like it's like been in the 30s and kind of windy, but yeah, I definitely, I mean, when I take my dog out for a walk, I definitely am, still got the hat on, the decent coat. Yeah. I don't know, what is it like in Atlanta right now?
70-ish and sunny. It's spring.
What?
spring
Oh, that
has-
sounds awesome.
But it could snow next week, you never know. You never-
Okay, okay. Yeah, no, we have like nothing green is coming out of the ground at this point. Yeah, no, it's
It'll be
still pretty
spring.
eventually, yeah, eventually it'll get here. Yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, this has been great. I got way more excited than I thought. And
Well, I'm glad you guys enjoyed it.
yeah, and then I put my contact information in the chat for anyone that needs it, and then also Sarah gave her contact information, and if you go to Instagram, you'll be able to find her, and if you find me, I'll find her for you. And
Yes.
even though it's close to the period of time that we're going to be having this workshop, we do have space for in studio and at home. And for the people who participate, whether you're at home or you're in the studio, you have access to the class online for 30 days. And sometimes people go on vacation or they have an unexpected illness or something keeps them from being able to get access to the recording. We're not nihilists when it comes, if you have a need, you call us and we'll try to figure out a way to give you that time so that you have everything you need to make it successful for you. And Shira says, I enjoyed the meeting. Thank you, from the UK. So that means you're an international superstar.
There you go.
The workshop is so neat. And neat as in cool and tidy, I would imagine.
I guess, yeah, I am fairly tidy. I kind of need it for my brain. Yes.
It shows in your work, which is also tidy. Yeah, nice. Well, thank you so much. I had so much fun.
Well, good. I'm glad you guys, yeah, it was great to see so many friendly faces. So yes, yeah, I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and if you want to take this workshop, you go to metalartsguildga.org and you can sign up. And there is for people who stay home, the cost is slightly less, not gigantically, but maybe $20 a day less. And that adds up. And of course, you don't have travel expenses. And for those of you that are in driving distance or live in Atlanta area, or you just want to hop on a plane because you can, we'd love to have you. And if you need any accommodation questions and answers, call me or text me and we'll take care of that for you. So
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Sarah.
cheers.
Yeah.
Talk soon. Bye.